I think the most effective communication strategy and the hardest one to execute is listening. Listening longer, listening as a skill, listening to hear, not to answer.
Welcome to the Power of Respect podcast with Charlie Liechtweis, author of the book, The Power of Respect in Business. Charlie is one of America's foremost authorities on respect and leadership development. And now, here's Charlie.
Hello, my name is Charlie Liechtweis. Welcome to another episode of the Power of Respect podcast. Today we are talking about the power of respect and gender diversity. My guest today is someone particularly experienced in both of those elements, and her name is Stephanie Liechtweis. If the last name sounds familiar, it's because Stephanie is not only a business leader with a very successful track record, she's also my wife. Her senior leadership experience, combined with her perspective as a mother and a woman, make her particularly qualified to share insights into respect and leadership. Stephanie has over 2 decades of sales, marketing, and general management experience in both B2C and B2B companies in the consumer products sector. Stephanie is currently the Chief Commercial Officer for a large consumer products company, MVP Group International, where she's responsible for strategic commercial direction, including product development, digital marketing, branded product portfolio, channel management, international sales, and e-commerce. Prior to the MVP Group, she held positions of President of Coats & Clark Inc., CEO of Fibercraft, VP Sales and Marketing at Jarden Branded Consumables, Vice President of Innovation, New Product Development and R&D at the Sterno Group, and Vice President of Marketing and Product Development at Blythe HomeSense. Stephanie has a BA in Liberal Arts from Colgate University in New York and is fluent in French, proficient in Spanish, and conversant in German. Wow, I barely speak English. Welcome, Stephanie. Let's get into some of our questions here, and you can share with the audience your experience. As I mentioned, you have a perspective from both a senior leadership role and as a woman, which I think will be very valuable for our audience. Your career spans nearly 3 decades. Please share with the audience how you got started in your career journey.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this conversation today. I very much appreciate it. My career began in the mid-90s, and I started in the toy industry, which was certainly an interesting place to begin as a woman. I worked for an international sales and marketing company, and I was the only woman who was not a secretary. Had a lot of very interesting learnings there, not the least of which was how to listen and learn from my peers by showing them respect and following the model, and this I was quite fortunate, of Jill Barad, who at the time was one of the first CEOs, woman CEOs, in any industry, but she happened to be the CEO of Mattel. And there were a lot of wonderful articles written about her and how she was a strong, focused leader who maintained her femininity while being assertive. So that was a great example for me in the beginning of my career that I look back on a lot and have continued to model as I go through my career.
So you have significant leadership experience leading and advising organizations, as we've noted, across numerous businesses. What are some of the biggest challenges you have faced as a leader? How did you tackle them? And maybe share some examples of successful outcomes and or less than successful outcomes for the audience to understand the difficulties we all go through in leadership roles.
I think one of the challenges, certainly for a woman rising through her career, is maintaining your femininity while showing respect and growing in your career. And part of that comes with learning, and it's not anything that's taught in school, how to be assertive, how to be firm, and feel good within yourself, while also not being balancing, not being seen as being too tough, too mean, and the bit of the double standard where it's okay to be rough and mean, as some might term it, for a man in the workplace. But for a woman, when she goes from being assertive to aggressive, it's seen as a negative. And learning to balance when are the appropriate moments to do that, and how it feels, and then build on that. And understanding that you have to respect yourself first, enough to feel comfortable in your own skin to then make that next step. And making that next step is giving respect to others by listening and learning through your career journey, both from those who do things very well and those who don't, how you don't want to be as a leader in business.
Did you find that the potential for a double standard between the behavior of men and women, did you find that to be a barrier in your career, either earlier or even later?
I found it was only a barrier in my own mind when I saw it and I couldn't move past it. As I learned to move past it, I saw the barrier, it was there. There are barriers in business and in life all over the place. Each one of us learns how to break through those barriers, jump over them, walk around them. And that learning comes from being constantly curious, constantly creative, and vulnerable and humble enough to ask for help, which is a very hard thing for a woman trying to rise fast in business, to learn to ask for help while still wanting to feel and appear strong.
Right. So who did you turn to as part of maybe your support system for that during those times?
I was fortunate to have some really good mentors, men and women, that I found throughout my career. One of whom was sort of in the middle of my career at Blythe Home Sense, a woman named Michelle. She was and still is the person I hold up as having been one of the best collaborative bosses who I try to model how I lead. She was respectful. She put you in positions that stretched you and she got out of your way. And so there's one example. There's also another example a little bit earlier in my career, when I was more on the sales side of things, a gentleman named Jim, who was one of my colleagues, and he said to me, Stephanie, listening is a skill. And he wasn't saying it in a mean or derogatory way. We were just having a conversation about how to be better at marketing and selling. And he said, listening is a skill that it takes a lifetime to master, and many times we don't master it. And taking those two leadership and mentor styles and applying my own style and comfort to that, and really honing it down to listening is about respect, putting people in right positions and listening to where they want to go in their career and getting out of their way is about respect, whether you're a man or a woman.
Well, those are great examples. And I think one of the things I'm hearing as I listen to your explanations of your experience is that when we talk about the potential dual standard of how men and women are evaluated potentially in the workplace, that collaboration is a method for overcoming those barriers, in the sense that you're not going at it in a battling section. You're looking at it in terms of I'm here to collaborate, and I'm demonstrating how to collaborate, and therefore getting those people to see what method they should use in return.
Absolutely.
Whether they choose it or not. And I think that means others will notice that from the outside who are viewing what is going on with the potential contention of that barrier.
Absolutely. I think learning to bring the right people together with a variety of perspectives, and I think that's key, helps move things forward, and also staying humble enough as you move up in your career, to recognize you can always learn from everyone on your team, internal as well as external.
Right. No, that's a good point. And you bring up the diversity concept several times in your conversation. And diversity and inclusion is an important topic in business and in our culture today, certainly. Can you share your perspective on diversity and inclusion from the perspective of the role that respect can play as an element to unlock the value of D&I, including discussing challenges for women and overcoming systemic gender bias and inequality?
Absolutely. That is a big question with a multi-part answer, I'll say. Certainly, as I've said before, listening, showing respect, giving respect to earn respect in my style, and what has proven to be successful for me is about bringing a variety of perspectives onto my team, into a particular problem to solve. And when I say variety of perspectives, I purposely reach out to team members and or put on my team varying genders, varying age groups, varying backgrounds, because I really think that creating an environment of respect in which those varying perspectives can be brought to bear can move a business forward, solve a problem faster, and oftentimes has some rough moments where if you don't have the root of respect at the bottom of those discussions, you won't get to a better place. Agreeing to disagree without being disagreeable through those fierce conversations. I'm referencing a book by a woman named Susan Scott, who I encourage my teams to read, and being fiercely respectful. She calls it fiercely honest. I like to use fiercely respectful with yourself as well as with your peers. Helps move things forward. There are times when personalities, misogynistic cultures, heavily egoed personalities make that very hard. And at those moments, I try to say to myself and encourage my teammates or those people who are working for me to have a little conversation in your head saying, thank you very much, I respect you, and let it roll off your back. It isn't always easy to do.
Right. Definitely not. Well, bias of any kind is something that can leave a bad taste in people's mouth and lead to the discussion and frustration of feeling the inequality blade stuck in you, if you will. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about this, again, I'm hearing that the challenge to overcome those barriers is not from battling those barriers. It's from operating in a way that is respectful and in a way that is collaborative, so that we're trying to focus on the real issue, which is how do we get this thing done, whatever it is we're working on.
Exactly.
And as long as people can understand that, amidst your frustration internally, not exhibiting that, they can understand, okay, stay the course, keep the focus in the right place, and don't fall prey to the anger or frustration that may come from some of those barriers.
Exactly. And I think it's also fine and important to recognize everybody has a rough day. Everybody makes mistakes. And as a leader, modeling giving yourself grace, and that is showing yourself your own self-respect. Mm-hmm. I had a bad day. I said something I probably shouldn't have said. Apologize. Recognize that. At times, have some self-deprecating humor to diffuse the tension of that can sometimes happen with a diverse group. Right.
And then from the other side of the coin, for the leader trying to deal with those barriers, having leaders that they report to or respect that can help support them through that process. So on the one hand, it's a leader acting that way, collaboratively, mm-hmm. respectfully, and then also supporting others to do the same thing, even when, as you say, they have a bad day.
Absolutely.
So when we think about these things, these elements of respect and the relationships that go with them, another thing comes to mind on the front of gender issues. Do you feel that the conventions for building relationships and alliances in business are different for women than men?
I think they shouldn't be. And I think to mitigate them, the differences that you might encounter, again, I go back to showing respect, to earn respect, listening as a skill, and recognizing that it isn't just about gender. It can also be about personality types. And what I mean by that is you have an analytical personality type who may speak about something or propose something in a certain way, a driver personality, and expressive who's going to tell a very long story that's driving the driver crazy, an amiable who is on the fence, just wants everyone to be friends. And the best leaders can flex through all of those personality traits and recognize when their team members, their subordinates, their peers, and even their boss is in which one of those spheres.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is as important in that sort of dichotomy or challenge of the different ways to mitigate. I guess frankly it's a lot about EQ and respect.
Right. And recognize, you make a great point about recognizing where people are at. I kind of think about that as an emotional scale. Where are they on that scale, and having the antenna to read that, to act accordingly. So if, again, relationships is an interesting subject, and it is viewed differently probably by men and women. In fact, that's the value of having both men and women's perspective on relationships. When we're in the process of developing that relationship, reading the room, if you will, or understanding where the other person is at, to make sure that you understand what directions not to go in as well as to go in is probably very important. And it's not just on women, it should be on men as well. I mean, like you said, there shouldn't be a difference. There is a difference based on gender and in society, but again, how do you mitigate that is what we've been talking about. So,
well, and also how do you leverage those differences to get to a better place?
right.
I think is whether it's men and women or millennials and Gen Xers and baby boomers in an office. It's really trying to leverage all of the strengths of the different perspectives to solve the business problem, to have the best marketing campaign, get the product on shelf into the strike zone in the arena that I've primarily been in, consumer products. I will say that I have encountered at times the challenge of, there never being a class to teach assertiveness, going from assertive to aggressive, certain kinds of negotiation skills. And it's definitely been in my life, the business school of life, that I have learned that in through trial and error, through bouncing off different mentors and people I respect. And that has probably been another good example of conventions where it's almost from some of the early gender differences of a Barbie versus a Matchbox car. Those play patterns and how from that young age, already you're creating a play pattern that is creating an example in life that's potentially different.
Right. No, that's true. And well, I don't think you're suggesting we get too broad based with respect to understanding what decisions we make on play patterns and other things. I think it's what I hear you saying, which is very important, The difference of diversity is not just about gender.
It's not.
It's about all these other categories. In fact, there's probably 10 or 11 at least examples of diversity. And as long as you keep that perspective, even though gender may be one of them, you can keep that concept in its own place as you deal with it, versus saying it's the only thing and there's only one way through it or not, kind of thing.
I actually think also one of the advantages of starting my career in international is recognizing the different perspectives of different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And as more and more businesses are multicultural, really paying attention to and understanding those different cultural perspectives and how they may be brought to bear or need to be mitigated or tamped down, so to speak, when working through a business opportunity, challenge, or problem, has turned out to be very, very interesting, and also helped me through my career.
Yeah, and striving for that awareness in any of these categories of diversity or bias is very, very important and not so easy to do. It takes time. We make mistakes as we try to be aware of it. And I think it's important as we learn going forward. And we're not talking about perfection, we're talking about progress. So it's very important to understand it's a journey. So when we think back on your career here, what would you summarize as your most important takeaways about respect and leadership?
I think I would reiterate what I've said from the early examples from my career with my colleague Jim and my boss Michelle. Listening is a way to show respect, to earn respect, particularly for sales and marketers at the core of their careers. That is extremely important and very, very hard to do.
Yes.
So that would be number one. Number two is to keep humility and show vulnerability. It helps you grow. It earns respect from your peers as well as your subordinates. It isn't a weakness. It is in fact a strength.
I think those are great examples and a great point. A lot of people think of that as a weakness versus a strength, especially when it's done within the context of your knowledge and experience that you bring to bear. So what would you be most proud of as a leader? What would you say you're most proud of as a leader?
I think I'm most proud of some of the team members that I've helped develop who have over the years come back to me, reached out and said, hey, I just got promoted to vice president. And the years working with you stuck with me and got me to where I am. Or I would want to work with you anywhere you go. I mean, it's gratifying in a wonderful way, and it's also another great way of earning and showing respect.
Yeah, no, I think, and you've mentioned the thought processes for overcoming these barriers and challenges, and there's another side of it is the communication process, which you've also mentioned. So, how would you describe the audience to leave them with a takeaway on the most effective communication strategies you've used and why you feel they're successful?
I think the most effective communication strategy and the hardest one to execute is listening. Listening longer, listening as a skill, listening to hear, not to answer. Right. And that listening isn't just about words, it's watching body language, whether through a Zoom or face-to-face. I would say that is probably the number one communication skill that I find the most successful and the most ongoing challenging, which I find exciting.
No, I think that's very important, and it's something that is not taught, as you say, in any class. It's something we sometimes learn the hard way. The thing that comes to my mind that I think about in my career, as I hear you say, listen longer, the thing that goes with that is if you're right now, you'll be right later. So you can afford to wait to listen, to hear what people are saying, and make sure you really understand ultimately where are they going with their issue, what do they need help from you with, or what are they trying to tell you to do, etc., that sort of thing. Well, I think, the breadth of your career and the success you've had, both from a standpoint of the levels you've reached, as well as the performance of the businesses you've been involved with and the people you've mentored, I think are great examples to our audience. And it's a spectacular reminder that anything's possible, as if we were willing to learn from our mistakes as we go along. So again, I want to thank you very much for being part of and sharing your experiences candidly with our audience.
I thank you as well. I very much enjoyed this conversation, and I think the journey in business, it continues through listening, through respecting, and always being curious and learning, whether you're keeping your mind open to learn from everybody around you, has certainly served me well, and I try to teach that to others. And I think, I probably didn't say that earlier, but I also think it's another great way to show respect.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. So again, I want to thank Stephanie Leichtweis for being with us and sharing her vast experience and her perceptions on these very important topics today. I especially want to thank you, the audience, for listening to the episode of Power of Respect. If you'd like what you heard today, please consider sharing the podcast and visit our website at expertsinhow.com. A quick reminder, if you'd like to read my book, The Power of Respect in Business, it's available on Amazon. Thanks again for listening, and remember, respect builds trust, trust builds relationships, and relationships are the key to leadership. Thank you.
This has been the Power of Respect podcast with Charlie Leichtweis, author of the book, The Power of Respect in Business. To listen to more episodes and to learn about Charlie's leadership development programs, visit his website, expertsinhow.com.